Hey guys, welcome to the song breakdown for Heat. I'm gonna kind of go through some of these songs that were on the EP as we're leading up to the album release here, just to give you an idea of some of like the theory behind the songs as well as how I did some of the layering. So we're gonna start with theory, and with a lot of these songs, I'm gonna do it on piano actually, but for Heat, it's a bit easier just to explain on guitar. So bear with me while I kind of try to do this on my guitar. Heat is a simple song except for where it's not. It's kind of all in one key more or less. It's all kind of in like a C minor um world. If I, had a better regard for myself as a person, I would have put it in B minor because then I could do the riffs on the open strings, but I didn't for some reason, and I don't usually like to retune my guitar. So let's start with this kind of like centerpiece that just appears throughout the whole song, like this chromatic riff that happens at the end of, every four bars or whatever, especially kind of during like the chorus parts. So that's all it is, and it's B flat down to F E, up again to A flat, and then down to like E flat D flat, and then usually that's a nice kind of like Phrygian setup into like the C, you know, um, and more in C minor, so that works out nicely. Let's kind of go through section by section, sort of what's happening. So um, sort of main chord progression that's used like in the choruses, quote unquote, is a pretty simple like minor pattern for the most part, where you're doing like minor one, and then you've got major three, minor four, like that whole thing, and that's fine. Um, where it gets weird is in the next bar where you do, minor one, and then you hit the major seven, and then this is like a flat five of some kind, like a flat, G flat power chord in this case, and then it's one of these, and then it does the little chromatic, right? That whole thing. So that's kind of what the chorus pattern is. The verse, the one verse there is follows that same pattern. The guitar isn't really in for that, and it's more sort of carried by the drums and the bass. And then there's the part that has the energy of a pre-chorus. Vocally, it's kind of the chorus, but the this thing where it goes down to like the A flat, that whole thing. So let's talk about that. So this part has some fun bits to it. So there's four patterns in that section. The first is the one I just played, and this is fun because it goes down to that E, which is not a note you would expect or a root you would expect in the context of C minor. And what this functionally is because we've got, if we're thinking about this in the minor key, this is like, major six, major seven. Then we get down to this E, and the way I understand this E is actually as like it's major one over E, so it's like C major over E is if we were looking at a piano, is how we would understand this chord. Then we hit the F and the G, and we land on this like F minor, minor four, and then so that's the first one. Second time, now we go to the D natural. So it's D and then E, and so it's really D minor. And actually, instead of we're hitting E again, but this time it's not so much C major over E as it is like an E5. Like I actually like the B natural here. I think that sounds good. So that's number two. Number three is a repeat again of number one. And then the last time through was very simple, where we do, major six, major six again, major seven again, and then we go up to this like, this flat two, the, like kind of like we're going into a Phrygian thing, and then we land on the, and then we do that whole thing again. So that's basically what that sort of pre-chorus is. That covers everything except for the bridge, and the bridge is a lot of fun. there's kind of two versions of this riff, and it's like the same notes, but it's a different rhythm. And so we're gonna start with like the 4/4 version, because that's the easy one, and that's the one that comes up first. Um, and it's just like a riff on this, you know, kind of hammering on the C note, and occasionally I'll hit, you know, I'll hit the third, I'll hit the second, and I'll hit the seven. So it's like flat 3, flat 2, flat 7, all those. So it's like it's a Phrygian riff basically. So it's, you know, something like that. So it's very simple. And where it gets really challenging is when we get to the not 4/4 version of this riff. It's basically like a pattern of, it's like 13, 13, 12 or something ridiculous like that. Where it's like, I'll play it a little slow here, and then I'll kind of break it down for you. It's like... That was 2 repetitions of it. The way I would kind of think of this, if I was like kind of breaking it down and like breaking the time signature down, would be like, it's like 5/3/5, 5/3/5, 5/3/4. And I usually, just the way I have to think about it is kind of just in terms of like the notes I'm playing. So it's like 4 hits and then 2 hits and then 4 hits. And so it's like 4/2/4, 4/2/4, 4/2/4, but then that last 4, I don't add the extra little buffer rest. Like there's no something the rest of there. So the way I understand it is kind of like this. I'll see if I can kind of like count it as I play it, and I'm gonna do it slowly. 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, and that gets put over. The drums do a lot of different things, because the first time through, the drums kind of like stick with that like 13 pattern, and then it does like a triplet feel over that, and then it kind of breaks down into that part where the vocals come back in the new version. The vocals come back in, and there's like the choir pad going on in the background, and it's the same pattern, but like the drums are like really solidly in 4/4, so it's kind of a really cool like polyrhythm feel that gets created. The only other thing I'll mention too is that at the end, like the last repetition of the choruses, so like, there's the pre-chorus at the end, and the guitar for the first time through goes back to this power thing. And then after the second time through, it goes to that 4/4 version of the bridge riff. But everything else is kind of the same, where it's doing, so yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the guitar, and why that sort of, those repetitions of the chorus at the very end sound a little different and bigger, is because that's what's happening with the guitar. And there's actually another guitar layered on top that's doing like a fifth up, kind of. It goes down to that note instead of going up to mirror. So anyways, that's what's going on with Heat, kind of as far as like kind of just the theory, and like how the tonality and the rhythm of the song is constructed. We're gonna jump over to Reason, where I will show you a bit about kind of how I did some of the layering. Hey everybody, welcome back. We're here to talk about some of the like production layers for Heat, kind of how the instrumental came together. We're gonna kind of take this some instrument at a time here. This is my the mixing channels. There's a lot of instruments here, not as many as on many of my songs, because the song doesn't have that much like orchestra, but there's some synths and a lot of drum stuff happening. So let's start with the drums, and we're gonna start by talking about kind of the quote-unquote acoustic kit. Let's see, here's a good spot. So this basically, these are sampled drums. It's Addictive Drums 2. And it's a nice sound. It's not nearly as big as it wants to be for this song that has a lot of EDM influence. And one thing I do on a lot of songs is I add in these electronic drum layers underneath. And so to get you a sense of what those sound like, it's these two here. And it's just those, okay? And I mix these differently depending on the song. In this one, the kick is really, really hot, because it's kind of, again, it's EDM kind of inspired, and so you want the kick really prominent on those beats, right? And so if we put that together with the the sort of acoustic, like a metal kit, you know, it still feels like a metal kit, but that kick is much more prominent, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's a clap that happens on the snare as well. This is just an extra layer. Again, this is also a very EDM influenced thing to do. This is this wave here is an additional very low frequency sine wave that gets triggered by the kick. Just to it adds a little bit of like oomph and depth to the kick sample. It's really hard to hear if I A/B it though. Like it's a very subtle effect, so I'm not gonna get too much into that. This E-aux thing is like a couple like extra kick hits that happen on some of the offbeats because the normal kick's just doing this 4 on the floor thing, and this is like an extra thing, and I did it separate because I wanted to mix it separately, but you'll hear it here. Duh, duh. Those hits, those are what E-aux controls, right? So, those are the drums. Let's talk about the guitars. And so, guitars are a little weirdly ordered. So, guitar 1 is the main guitar. You know, here's the bridge, right? It's double tracked, hard pan left and right, and then mix them together. The guitar tone I use is like the same across all the songs pretty much, and it's like 3 different amp sims that are in parallel, and some of them are kind of panned, and the volumes are a little different. It creates a really nice big sound. And so that's what's going on there. Guitar 2 is actually the one it's this little wobbly guitar over here. You know? That was fun to record. Guitar 3 is more like Guitar 1, and I wish Guitar 3 was named Guitar 2, and Guitar 2 was named Guitar 4, but here we are. Guitar 3, where's the bridge? Here we are. Guitar 3 adds a nice layer of a fifth over Guitar 1 sometimes. So here's just Guitar 1. Guitar 3 is here we go, yeah. That's Guitar 1, and then just Guitar 3, it's basically the same thing, it's just up a fifth, kind of. That note's a little different, but I mentioned that in the, you know, going through the guitar parts. And then together, you'll hear that it makes a nice big sound. And that's used there in the bridge, and it's also used here, kind of when everything comes in at the chorus. You know. The last guitar here is Guitar 4. Guitar 4 does these kind of like high-range power chords, that kind of are just at the end. They kind of fade in during that pre-chorus, and then they just keep going on. Right. So those are the guitars. And so if we do like 4, 3, and 1, you'll hear like there's a lot of guitar happening, but I think it's pretty well split during like in the actual mix. You know. So that's that. The bass, I'm not going to talk about in too much depth here. This is my mix of the bass. I'm using like, you know, 4 different layers here where there's the guitar-y, so there's just the dry bass. It's like on a very like simple, like kind of DI patch. There's like the wet bass, which is the bass that Nathan gave me. Nathan Navarro doing the bass parts for this, really killed it. When he sent me the bass parts, he separately recorded the distortion. He recorded that there was separate output, so this is just the distortion part. So these two were kind of meant to go together. And then one thing I also like to do sometimes is run the bass through an electric guitar patch, like a metal electric guitar patch. Which is really gross sounding, you know what I mean? So, I kind of like how this turned out, because you get those nice pops, and it sounds really prominent, but you still have this meaty sound underneath it. So that's the bass. Piano is not very prominent in this song. Like, it is around during the choruses, but it's mostly prominent, as you may be aware, during the breakdown, but also during, like, these pre-choruses. It's kind of what it is mostly shining, you know? Let's talk about the synths. Most of these synths, I think, are, Dimension Pro patches. Dimension Pro is an old software synthesizer that, came with a DAW called Sonar, which is the first DAW I ever used, and definitely outgrew that DAW. It's a bit dated. But I really liked that synthesizer and some of the patches that came with it. And so it was a bit of a pain to get them usable in Reason. I had to kind of jump through some hoops and use like a wrapper plugin, but we're doing it, and ping synth is one of them. And the ping synth is very subtle, and it's like a little ping you'll hear on the, in this case, left pan. Just on kind of the offbeats. The other three are kind of the more prominent ones, and we'll start with telling you about the synth bass. And the synth bass is most prominent during like the first verse here, where it's used. It's really just like synth bass and drums here for a lot of this, you know. It's kind of a cool sound. The distorted synth has a little bit of a different role. The distorted synth is the one that is doing these octaves, and it does this riff anytime this riff comes up. It's doing this riff with the guitar. Synth lead is this much higher pitched synth that's used. It's really prominent during like the choruses, actually even like the pre-choruses. It's got this nice reverb on it. It's a little more spacious. So, you can really hear that. It's kind of whiny sound. Yeah, I like that. That one's definitely a Dimension Pro synth. The only one that might not be distorted is synth and synth bass. I don't remember if they're Dimension ones or if they're not Dimension, they're Europa, which is a Reason synth. But yeah. Oh yeah, let's talk about I love the vocoder. So the vocoder is a vocoding of one of the synths. I think it's the distorted synth with guitar 1, if I'm not mistaken. So like here's the distorted synth during this part. Right, it's playing that riff. And guitar 1 is also playing that riff. I just wanted to see what it would sound like if I vocoded those two things. So here's what it sounded like. Oh, yeah. It's basically that, but it's not guitar 1, it's actually guitar 4. You can kind of hear like those high range guitar power chords, so it's actually this guitar here that it's vocoding. Right. It's kind of a gnarly sound. There are some strings. They're kind of playing with everything else. They're kind of in the background, and there's this choir, I'm pretty sure, is just keeping like root fifth, maybe octave, kind of throughout. It's like just an extra bit of texture. Yep, they're vibing there. That's mostly it. The only other thing I'll demonstrate here is some of the sidechain compression stuff, because this is kind of fun. This song utilizes a fair bit of sidechain compression, at least in my mix. I think my mixing engineer did as well. There are parts where I turn it off. Like during the bridge, I didn't want it, because I wanted everything to stay big. But during the chorus is when we get to this part, and actually even more so like this part. So you'll see this here is sort of which bus things are running into, and you'll see that a lot of stuff is running into the purple, which means it's either like a heavy or a soft sidechain compression. And that basically is a tool that ducks things out of the way, triggered by the kick drums, that the kick drum is really, really prominent. And so you'll hear that this is just like a mix of a bunch of instruments, but it like is kind of pulsing. And where it's pulsing and like going down is where the kick drum is hitting, So you kind of hear that pulse growing on the offbeats. Yeah, and the light is just a different set of instruments. Like, which instruments did I want more or less sidechain compression on? Didn't want a lot of compression on the guitars in that way because, kind of want to keep the consistency of that riff. But, like, the synthesizers and the choir are really cool, and they're really, like, throttled by that kick. And even the drums have some sidechain compression like this. I think the, a lot of the cymbals come through here. A little more subtle with that, but you can hear that they're like that, because it's this loud, washy, crash cymbal and hi-hat layer that I love, but it's it gives a little bit of room for the kick, high frequency stuff when that stuff bumps out. So that's what's going on there. Yeah. Again, this is just my mix. This is not the final one, but you know, I think it sounds pretty decent. And that's kind of the layers that this song has. So it's not too much, you know. Like there's a number of guitars, there's a lot of drum layers and a few synths, but you know, all I've got for orchestra here is a string ensemble and a choir, and that's not very much compared to what many of these songs dealing with. Because we're going to be talking about June, we're going to be talking about Starfall later, and those songs have many layers, and so it'll be very interesting to kind of talk about how those work with each other. So yeah, that's a little bit about how Heat works and kind of what's going on with this song. I'm glad you stuck with it as I kind of went through all this. Like I said, we will be doing more of these with the other songs in the EP, in particular June and Starfall. So make sure you stay tuned for those. And yeah, thanks for watching.